As patron of the Arundel Museum, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you and give you a flavour of the fascinating exhibits that are on show. I do hope the short film you are about to see will encourage you to come and visit the museum and learn more about the history of our beautiful town.
Located opposite the main gates of Arundel Castle, the museum is open 7 days a week from 10 till 4 and is run by friendly volunteers.
Thank you.
Our aim is to bring the history of Arundel to life.
Thank you.
This case contains the oldest man-made objects in Arundel Museum. They are flint hand axes made by our ancestors and were found near the village of Slindon, which is not far from Arundel. The ancient ancestor that made these hand axes was called scientifically Homo heidelbergensis. But because the remains have been found near the village of Boxgrove, which is also close to Arundel, the colloquial name is Boxgrove Man. Boxgrove Man was a hunter-gatherer. That means they hunted and gathered for their food, not farming like we do today. The flint axes were very sharp, and that enabled them to cut meat. In fact, near the remains of Boxgrove Man were found the remains of a horse, the bones of a horse, and the horse remains had been cut by the flint axes that we see here in this case. I'm now going to put on my museum gloves so I can show you the axes themselves. This is the axe. And what I find remarkable is that when you hold the axe, it just fits in your hand so snugly. I feel a connection to our ancient ancestors 500,000 years ago, the ancient inhabitants of the Arundel area.
Now we have the holdings trolley here. So I'll open up the first tray and we'll see what we have. And what we have here is echinoids. Now these were really like jellyfish. They've obviously fossilized, and they used to have little hairs. You can just see little marks where hairs came out of them, and they swam around in the water, and gradually as time went by they ossified, and this is what we have here. But there again you're able to feel something that is in fact 80 million years old. Now here we have tiles. These were all found in Arundel. A piece of mosaic flooring and a ridge tile. And you can see where the workman put his thumb along there. A piece of Anglo-Saxon pottery, also found around Arundel. That was found up near the castle. Here's a piece of tiling that has been covered with a glaze. That was a great status symbol, to have your tiles glazed in your house. And here we have a piece of Victorian mosaic, because the Victorians liked to feel that was a sign of status for them. And here's a very interesting piece. The Duke, he didn't like being woken up first thing in the morning by the horses that delivered the milk. So he insisted that they all had shoes with hard rubber surfaces on, so they didn't make a noise. But all of these, you see, are very interesting to hold and feel history in your hands.
The history of Arundel as a port starts with its registration in 1071. The story is told here in the museum with a map of the river and then models of the ships up to 300 tons which used to bring their cargoes into Arundel. They came from the south coast of England and across the Channel, and their stores included wine, cheese and salt fish. They'd be unloaded in Arundel and then distributed across the rest of Sussex by pack horses and by barge. Arundel was a sort of medieval Amazon warehouse of its time. On the return journey, they took timber and grain for export. It is sometimes asked if Arundel had any smuggling, and the answer is probably yes, as there was a house down by the bridge on the river which had secret trapdoors underneath which opened onto the boats below it. Arundel's decline as a port came in the 19th century, when larger ships could not get up the River Arun, and railways and roads took over from canals and rivers as the principal means of transport. So 800 years as a port gradually came to an end. But some traditions lingered on, like the one where if you come to Arundel on the 1st of March in any year, stand on the town bridge and jump up and down 10 times, you will not have fleas for 12 months.
The museum also has an interesting collection of tools and machinery from Arundel's industrial past, including this printing press, which is over 100 years old and came from the offices of the West Sussex Gazette in Arundel High Street.
This section of the museum contains all that you would need to know about the origins of Arundel Castle and its inhabitants, from its origin on Christmas Day 1067 until the present day. As with most noble families, their history has been one of snakes and ladders, but through it all they have managed to survive through to the 21st century. The castle itself has undergone many changes, from the original 11th century motte and bailey through to the 12th century stone castle, where stone was imported from Caen in Normandy, through to the 17th century and its ruin during the English Civil War. And this fine model here is made by one of our former members and shows the castle during the Civil War. After the castle was left ruinous, not only by the battles that were fought here, but by the parliamentarian troops slighting the castle after they left in 1653 by blowing up all of the west wing and taking the roof off of the living quarters, and then giving the keys back to the Howard family, Mr. Howard at the time, no title at that time. The family, of course, like many families, left it in ruins. But then, of course, when we come through to the 19th century, it was the 15th Duke of Norfolk who actually decided that he would rebuild the castle in his wife's memory. He had a lot of wealth and privileges, but he also had a sadness too, because his first wife died very young, and he was left to bring up his only son himself, who had been born blind and epileptic. So quite sad. And he decided that he would rebuild the castle in his wife's memory, and it took him 30 years, from the 1870s through to 1900. And what a magnificent castle it is. And today it can be seen as a Grade 1 listed building for the later part of this castle, but for the medieval section it's also a scheduled ancient monument. And Duke Henry's life ended on a happy note, because after he'd finished this rebuilding of the castle, he looked around and found a nice new wife who was much younger than him and was able to have another family. He had 3 daughters and then the much longed for son, who was able to carry on the dynasty.
The museum has something to interest everyone, with artifacts from prehistoric times to the present day. There are lots of interactive exhibits and plenty for children to enjoy.
Arundel Museum was opened by His Grace the Duke of Norfolk in 2013 after moving from 61 High Street. There's a considerable amount of work into moving from there to here, because we had to raise the best part of £1.5 million, which for a small set-up as Arundel Museum Society was a considerable burden. But since we've been here, we have made a real impact in the town, in as much that we have many events. We do a great deal of outreach work to the schools and to the local old people's homes. And we also have a lot more visitors and clubs coming into the museum, which has raised our footfall considerably and raised our profile within the town. I hope you enjoy your visit.